Welcome to the Select Board meeting of March 18th, 2026. In attendance for the Select Board this evening, we have Amy Parsons, Jane Nevin-Smith, myself, Randy Iser, Molly Keegan, and David Phil. Pursuant to Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022 as amended, this meeting is being conducted in a hybrid format. The public has been provided with adequate alternative means of access via Zoom as noted in the posted meeting notice, along with access and participation instructions. As chair, I hereby notify all participants that this meeting is also being recorded by the town through Hadley Media and will be made accessible to the public. In accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20F, any person who intends to record or transmit this meeting must inform the chair at this time. Anybody recording besides us? No. Seeing none. Additionally, the virtual hybrid nature of this meeting is for convenience only. The board is meeting in person in a public location. In the event that there is technical difficulties, the board will continue its meeting notwithstanding the lack of the continued hybrid access. Okay. Move right along to item 3.1, right? 2.1. Okay, why is my...
You want to read mine?
Well, if yours is better than mine.
Okay. Yours has a T.
Okay, that's what I thought. Now mine says, okay. Item 2.1, town administrator interview. So I apologize. I don't know what's going on with my computer, but I'm looking at something totally different. So we have with us this evening Nate Malloy, who was one of the finalists from our town administrator search about a year ago. And I believe that Mr. Mason has told us he's getting to the end of his rope and we need to replace him. And so Mr. Malloy is still interested and he's here this evening for us to re-interview. Mike, do you have anything else you'd like to add to that?
No, I think you said it all. Randy. I think the only issue I think you would make sense to just remind the viewing public is that one of the reasons that that Nate wasn't officially selected the last time, even though he was selected in a straw poll by the select board, was simply because there was a lot going on in town. We were just about to begin talking about overrides. We had our first really difficult financial cliff that we were heading towards, and folks just didn't feel like it was fair or right to make a jump like that at that point in time. Even though we're not necessarily in much better of a financial state, I think at this point, the folks in charge of this town, the select board and the finance committee, have a much better grasp as to how to handle things. And so that, coupled with the fact that, as I mentioned, a few meetings ago, I think the town deserves someone who can dedicate their full time and attention as the town administrator, as well as someone who can dedicate their full time and attention to being police chief. So we're grateful that Nate was willing to come back out here and talk to us, talk to you folks today. I just wanted to make sure that folks understood that that's how we ended up where we are.
Okay, thank you. Nate, come on up, please.
Welcome back to Hadley.
Sure. Thanks for having me. Nate Malloy. I don't know, how this should begin, or is the mic working?
It is.
Yes, it is.
Hard to tell.
So we all have the opportunity to ask Nate questions once again. And I don't know, does anybody want to start, or do you want to start at the end?
Hey, you want to do round robin or something? Or?
David, go ahead.
I don't really have a question for you to start off, but if you could give the people at home a quick overview of your background, what you do now,
Sure.
why you're interested in this position.
Sure, yeah. So I've worked in Amherst since 2008. I went to graduate school at UMass for landscape architecture and regional planning. So I earned two master's degrees. And I started off as an internship in Amherst, actually. And I've worked my way up to the assistant director of planning and economic development. So I've been there, for almost 18 years. I really enjoy working in municipal government. And so, I started off doing, nuts and bolts things, working the front desk, processing invoices, bringing them down to accounting, getting to know the whole operation of municipal government. And so now, I work with the planning board. I look at regulations, town policies. It's something I really like. I really wanted to get into management and administration, municipal management. So I've taken, Mass Municipal Association Finance Seminar. I'm enrolled in Human Resources Seminar. And so that's, where I'd like to see myself going. So I like the planning world. I really like municipal government as well. And so it's where I have my career. I live in South Deerfield. My family's been here. I grew up in Western Mass, and I'd like to stay here.
You actually answered part of, I was going to ask if, from that time frame to now, if you've done anything to continue your education. So it sounds like you're,
Right.
enrolled in a couple of other MMA programs.
I am. And since that time, I've taken a few HR training. So onboarding employees, discrimination, harassment policy, conflict management. So yeah, I've taken a few courses. I was on the state's commission for micromobility. So that was a statewide commission that looked at, e-scooters and e-bikes and looked at how to, encourage them for economic development, but also provide recommendations for safety. And so that, commission met over the course of almost a year, and we're making recommendations to Mass DOT. So that was a learning experience, working with, state officials and going into Boston.
So question I would have, going back to the original interview, I think one of the areas that we thought that perhaps was a little bit weaker on your resume, if I can put it that way, than some other candidates, is I'm going to call it the whole HR experience, the opportunity to work with human beings day in and day out, who sometimes are on their best behavior, other times not, motivating people, all that comes along with being the lead manager effectively in town.
Sure.
So why do you think that you would be able to be successful in Hadley in that regard?
Sure. Yeah, I think I'm really affable and approachable. And so also, since we last interviewed, I had been onboarding new employees for about 10 years. And so I directly supervise, 4 to 5 staff involved in their daily management and operation. So, I circulate around with them. I like, face-to-face interactions. We have weekly meetings to set, goals. And so, I'm part of their annual review process. And so I have grown in that respect in terms of managing my team. Yeah, and I think, I come to work and I really enjoy what I do, and I want everyone else to enjoy what they do. And so I will bring that positivity and professionalism, to Hadley. And so I think, I try to lead by example. And when I first started working in Amherst, they're like, Nate, it's not a private world, right? You don't have to work late, you all these things. I'm like, but I really like what I do. And so I don't mind, coming in early or working weekends and getting things done. And I really want to, encourage and empower employees to feel the same way. Like they want to come to work, find something they're interested in. They can explore their curiosity, encourage professional development. So, Amherst has been really generous in that respect. And so, management was really supportive when I said I was coming back here. And they're like, oh, read this article. Here's some paper, here's something that you should look at before you meet with Hadley. And so
I think we know the articles they gave you.
and so, that's how I want to, that's what I want to bring forward. I'm so glad that they were supportive. And so I think that's really important. So that's something I would really like to, continue evolving and growing with. And I agree. I probably don't have as much experience as others, but I feel like, I can learn. And I feel like I've learned by listening to my superiors and my mentors. And so, it's things you can't learn in the classroom, how to be approachable, how to handle rough situations in terms of personnel. And so I've been more involved with that, meeting with HR in terms of personnel issues and working with my supervisors and coming up with plans for people. And so that has changed in the last year and a half.
Okay, you mentioned dealing with rough situations with employees. How do you feel you do with that type of a situation?
Sure. I mean, pretty well. I really don't like conflict. And so, some of it is, how to be collegial and still have a professional relationship. So you might not be friends with someone, but you still can be professional and say hi to them, even if you're not, agreeing on something. And so typically it's, can you work it out through just face-to-face communication? Is it my communication style? Is it theirs? Are we just not meeting in the middle? In some cases, we've actually, written a kind of a performance plan. So how to, what are the kind of operations of, interaction between people. And so how can that, mitigate things, whether it's, different viewpoints or, someone's not, doesn't like how you approach something. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't hold a grudge. I feel like I can move past things. I realize a lot of things may be just due to miscommunication, and it's really not a personal nature, it's a professional nature. And so I don't really like things get to me, so, I mean, someone can disagree with me. So when I say rough, I don't want to mean that like everything's rough, right? So I think disagreements aren't rough. That's just, something you can talk through. And so if it's really something that needs to be worked through, then it is, use HR, come up with a, something in writing, figure out what's a great way to approach it and move forward.
Okay, and you said you don't like conflict, but are you okay with dealing with it when you have to?
Oh yeah, I mean, so to me, if someone disagrees with you, or I'm presenting something tonight at the planning board, downtown design standards, a lot of people might not like them. That to me, that's not conflict, right? They just don't like what we're presenting, and so the question is, what really rises to a level of conflict? And so for me, if there's disagreements or someone doesn't like something, that's not conflict. It's really like, are you at an impasse in terms of someone really doesn't want to listen to you, and no matter how much you approach it, you have to figure out a way to get through and reach common ground. And so, that can happen at a meeting. To me, that's not conflict. That's just, part of the job, right? And so it's not like I run away from conflict. But I guess for me, conflict is something really serious. And so, what I've experienced in Amherst, I'd say I've never had a conflict really, right? And so I don't consider disagreements with employees or the public a conflict.
Okay, so what I heard you say was mostly related to meeting stuff where, but let's say your town administrator in the town of Hadley, your office is upstairs, and you've got somebody either on the second floor or the first floor who's ripping about something.
Oh, sure.
And that they're causing other employees angst because of their attitude about something.
Right.
How would you deal with that?
Oh, sure. I mean, I think in those situations, it's, it would be really important to separate the person from the place and try to talk to them first and, take them, outside or try to understand why they're so upset. And I'm okay approaching someone like that. So, we've had people come to the counter where I've been asked to call 911 because they're getting really aggressive and no one else is comfortable talking to them. And so I approach them and I say, you're scaring the people. I'm calling 911. Is that okay? Can we talk out in the lobby? And then they, and you have to de-escalate the situation, and that's okay. So in that instance, I would, maybe you don't address it head on right away, but you can remove them from the situation and start learning about the situation. But I think, anything publicly there, like you're not going to chastise someone publicly, right? You want to and get a hold of them and talk to them privately and see how you can manage it. And maybe it is an improvement plan where you have to write steps down and work with the other employees. What is really the root cause of that issue? Is it something that can blow over, or is it something that is day in and day out that you have to manage?
Okay, Jane, go ahead.
Could you talk about the management experience you have had in your current job, both with people and money?
Sure. So I can start with the money. I apply for a lot of grants. So I manage usually over $1 million in grants every year, whether that's, federal block grant, state grants. And so, I also help with capital planning, CPA, Community Preservation Act funding, and the planning department budget. So we have a capital plan for the planning department, and then we have operations money. And so, within that, I monitor that. I work with the planning director and other staff in the department. So we're multi-department functional area. And so, I look at the accounts, look at where the spending is, recommend where funding should go. We're driven by the fiscal year. So especially with the grants, there's audits every year. So I, prepare for those, work with the auditors. Before coming to UMass and working in Amherst, I was a mutual fund accountant in Boston. I managed mutual funds for a few years. So, hundreds of millions of dollars every day, monitoring trades, activities, reporting to NASDAQ and doing all that. So, I've taken that and used it with my grants and everything. So in terms of people management, the department is, it's about 6 people where there's 25 people on the floor in the second floor of town hall. So we're considered a functional area with inspections, health, planning, conservation, it used to be sustainability. And so, I manage a team of about 5 or 6 individuals. And so, especially in the last 2 years, I'm, direct day-to-day manager. So, meeting with them daily, helping review tasks, meeting with them weekly in terms of department head meetings or department meetings, reviewing their work, and then supervising their work. So helping them, assign tasks and, delegate things and monitor their work. So more of
Do
that.
you do that? The other word it's the buzzword is micromanage, or are you supportive of them figuring out their own paths?
Yes. So I'm getting better at not micromanaging. So typically I would give them the resources. I like to give them the resources and the idea to figure it out and challenge them, and they can come ask me for questions. And so, for instance, with the downtown design standards, I had staff develop a web page and public outreach and all that material. And, we'd meet periodically once a week and they ran with it. Right. So it wasn't something I needed to be involved with, so I don't need to read what they're writing. I'm not going to put it in my voice. I'm okay with, however they want to phrase it. Right. I'll look at it for accuracy or consistency, but I'm not going to, spend my time really getting into those details. And so I feel that way with the staff I manage, with the planning board. If someone wants to write a report on an application, I let them, right? I don't need to then go in there and really work on it. I'll look at it again if it's accurate to the zoning bylaw or to the regulations, but I'm not going to, sit with them and have, actually try to work with them to write it.
Okay, my observation is that Amherst has a lot of people in a lot of different areas. We have one person in each area. So there's a lot more one-to-one person in terms of what goes on in this town. You want to talk about DPW, you talk to Scott.
Sure.
It's not that other people there. It's
Right.
And so this will be a different style because each person has its own focus, if you will,
Right.
and
Yeah.
problems.
No, so, we interact with the department. So like I said, when I first started, I would be down in accounting a lot because I also did procurement. So it was like, let's get the bids ready. So I was working with the comptroller and the accountant. I work with the assessor a lot, whether it's requesting, a butter notices or just we talk about, how to look at new properties and developments. And so we do have a development group meeting. We try to meet periodically with multiple departments, public works, recreation, sometimes police. We talk about what's happening in town, whether it's developments, public or private, what other departments are looking at. And so it's not a department head meeting. It's really, we call it the development group, and it's really looking at, projects and things and initiatives of the town. So we do, interact quite frequently with other departments.
Thank you.
Hello. I've seen you the whole time from the beginning. Actually, before I ask my question, I did want to make just a couple of comments. So I've been there since the beginning. I was on the search committee and part of the interview process from the beginning. So I did want to say that I'm glad that you're back because you were my first choice. Don't know if I can say that in public, but I just did. I don't know if I'm allowed to, but whatever. And I actually, one thing that I really did appreciate is that you're from here. And I appreciate that you haven't been a TA before because Hadley is a very unique town. We have a smaller population, but a huge business base. And I didn't really want someone coming guns blazing from, somewhere else that was going to, try to compare us too much to their previous experience, because Hadley, I think, is really unique in itself. And I appreciate that you're somebody that wants to come in and grow with us and to learn with us, because there's a lot going on right now. So I'm very glad that you have the gumption and you're willing to come for that. So my first question, and I think we probably have already asked you this, but not in public, but in our interview process, how you would handle a department head or somebody that could potentially be leaning on you too much, that somebody that, feels like they have to come to you for everything, that might need to stand on their own a little more?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few different ways to approach it. You could, I think, speaking to them candidly actually is really important.
Mm-hmm.
And then, asking them questions. So, you can assign tasks or you could ask them to do things. So, kind of put it in their court. So, how would they do something, bring it to me and try to, slowly get them to, feel important in that they can make their own decisions. And so, I'd actually tell them that, like, I want staff, if we have professional staff, you use what you have. And so, make your decisions, you can come, run it by someone, but, I'd want to empower staff that they feel like they can make decisions, and it's okay to make mistakes. And so, we can fix mistakes, but I'd rather someone learn and grow. And so, Yeah, and so that's kind of the way I'd approach it, is that, I'd want them to feel like they can make mistakes, that they can try new things, that they don't need, my assurance every step of the way, or anyone's assurance, right? So if you're, if you have, you're working professionally in this field, like, feel comfortable, doing that. And if you make mistakes, we can work on it. And so, for instance, if someone makes a mistake in the department, it's not, we don't name someone, it's, the department made a mistake or the town made a mistake, and we fix it. And it's not like we single anyone out. And so I think it's really important. You're a team, you end up being a family. And so it's really, you support each other. And so, I still want to support the person, but I'd probably be a little candid with them and just say, you don't really have to come in to, meet with me every day, or, you can try to figure this out, or if you would like to, bring me things, right, to see, right? Like actually work on things and bring them to me. Like, it's hard to, in terms of the question, discern, like, how much are they leaning on you? But I'd really like people to feel empowered. So if you have your degree, if you're working professionally, use it, use your voice. And so sometimes in Amherst, someone will say, well, you're really opinionated, if I'm with a board or committee, but it's like, well, I'm a planner and I've been there for so long. Sometimes I realize like, hey, I might have to step back, but we have professional staff. And so I think, let's use them. And so we have professional staff in every department. I think that's a really important thing to do and have. And so let's rely on them to learn and grow.
My other question, which I think I've already asked you before, but so with this job comes a lot of things, a lot of different hats you have to wear on any given day, a lot of sometimes firefighting. And how do you prioritize to not end up with analysis paralysis or get so stuck that you get so stressed and then just completely shut down? How do you prioritize your day?
Yeah, I mean, I will say I don't really get stressed. I'm usually pretty calm and collected. And so, I have driven grant applications to Boston to meet the deadline for noon. And, I used to run to FedEx at 5:30. I mean, so, I feel like I'm, pretty collected. Priorities, some of it's like what's immediate and what really needs to happen that day or week and what's more long-term. I think it's just kind of how do you balance and juggle those tasks? And so, like right now, there's a lot of projects that day to day, it's not that busy, right? So we're looking at, different regulations in town or projects and initiatives. And so, you chip away at it every day, but then there are the more immediate things like, okay, someone called and they have a really important question about a project, an application. So you address it. Or we have, a meeting tonight, what do we need to do to get ready for it? And you could just shift gears. And so, I mean, using your calendar and lists and other things, I feel like I have a lot of different ways to manage tasks. I feel like, it's really whatever is probably most important, you have to get done and put everything else into the schedule.
Good for now. David?
Yes, got two. First one is, this potentially the time that you're coming into town will probably be, I would say, one of the most difficult time periods for a town administrator in my memory. And at least the last probably 40 years or so. You're coming in at a time where, depending what happens with an override vote, you may be laying off a dozen people and cutting departments, cutting services, or depending what happens with an override, you may be maintaining services, just trying to be more efficient about it, make things better. I guess talk a little bit about your approach to handling, one way or another, whether we end up with an override and we have the funds to continue to do things as we've always done them in the town, or an override failing and we have to make drastic cuts.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's really important for the community to know, what's at stake and be really clear, in communication. So what does an override mean? How does it affect the budget? And, I think that's happening. So what are the cuts and what are the losses? And so actually, when I was in Amherst for a few years, we had kind of a similar situation, staff reductions. And so, my position was eliminated. And so, we would have frequent meetings with the town manager, and he said, we're going to be laying off a number of individuals over time. And so I was like, huh. And as I'm walking up to the upstairs, I see the HR director and someone else. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I'm one of those positions. And he said, it's great. Your position's being eliminated, but you're not fired. You're now all grant funded. You get to work for the town and see what you can do. And I was like, fine. So I applied for, 14 grants that year and as many the next year. And I, earned my position, and then it was rolled back into the budget. And so, but what was important there was that, there was communication, there was lead up. So, everyone knew that it wasn't the person, right? It's the Financial Times. And so, you still value the people. And so really, communicating that. So it's really, there's financial implications to an override. I understand it's not an easy discussion. I think a lot of communities are facing that right now. And so some of it would be, it's really not a personal, issue. It's a financial issue. And just, I think having really clear communication is important. So, have the staff and the community understand what's happening, what's at stake, what are the repercussions, what could be the benefits. And it's also a great time to plan, right? So Hadley's been tightening your belt. You've been doing a lot of things. And so to me, it's also a great opportunity to say, okay, how do we, move forward? What are other things we can do? And so I think, you can use it as a time of reflection and try to see how how you can move forward.
And the other one is, as a new town administrator, most people will give the answer of, well, I'm going to kind of be open-eared and see how things go and ease into things. But obviously in this town, we have people that have been here 30 plus years in their position. We have people that have been here, a couple months in their position. So how specifically would you implement changes or suggest changes when you have that resistance from people that say, this is how we've always done things. There is no other way to do it.
Right. Yeah, it's a good question. I think I'd like to, follow the, select board lead and look at towns, plans and policies, right? So, what's supported in the master plan update, the housing production plan, and, use some of that as guidance. And so, I think people may agree on a vision for Hadley, but then it's the details on how to get there, right? So is it, preserving rural character? What does that really mean? Looking at Route 9, what does it mean for change on Route 9? Is, what is economic development? Is it, just employment, or can it also be housing? Is it, is it a tax-based growth, or what does it mean? And so, I think, following the guidance of, like I said, the select board and the town plans, but also meeting face-to-face with individuals is really helpful to understand really what the concerns are. And, and sometimes they may not agree. And I think sometimes it's then what's best for the community. And so, if you want to preserve certain areas and develop certain areas, I think that's really important. And so is that supported by the documents you have in place in town and the policies? And maybe they don't agree with it. And I think as long as they understand why it's important, maybe they won't agree with it, but at least they understand. And I think that's really important. And so, I think it's a challenge. I think, you might have to give and take and compromise. And so, the University Drive overlay is something I worked on in town in Amherst. And so, allows 6-story buildings, mixed use buildings. And, originally it started off as a student housing overlay is what I proposed. And I'd said, let's have 2,000 beds here. And, people were saying that's their worst nightmare. And I was saying, I get it, but in terms of where you look at it in town, it's, proximity to UMass along, Northampton Road, and, how it would be least impactful to neighborhoods. It's actually a great location. And so over, many months, actually, it was over a year, it changed. So it's no longer student housing. It's, basically just a mixed use overlay. So, market rate housing with inclusionary units for affordability, requirements for office or commercial, residential space on the first floor. And it's really flexible in terms of, say, dimensional standards or regulations. And, we have one project going in, we've had a lot of interest. And so to me, some neighbors are still concerned about what it might look like. And I understand that. At the same time, I think it was actually a great opportunity. So, to have growth and change, and that was an appropriate place. And so I think some of it is just explaining that and, again, clear communication, understanding why people may be resistant to change. And, and I think there's a lot of examples in the area. There's great communities surrounding Hadley and Western Mass that have tried things. And I think there's a lot of examples you could point to of, how you can change but still maintain your character and who you are.
Since he stole my question, I had to think of one on the fly here. So kind of in the same vein, when you start, like David said, there are people who've been here for a really long time.
Right.
We've got some select board members who've been around for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And, I would imagine that logically you're going to be having conversations with a lot of people, the department heads, Mike, Jennifer, us, the key stakeholders. And you're probably going to hear some pretty strong opinions, and those opinions may actually be quite quite opposite, right?
Mhm.
So one person's going to come at you and say, you know, this is really important. We need to make sure we do this. And somebody else is going to say with great conviction, the worst thing we can do is that. We need to do this. So what sort of process are you going to use when you inevitably are going to be, you know, learning
Sure.
information that might be jumbled up?
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be important to meet with, the planning board and other boards and committees in town, different staff and, individuals, so stakeholders, whether it's, property owners, developers, and just really get a sense for it all. But I think, really, if you want any community to survive, there has to be some growth and change and adaptation. And so, I think what Hadley's seen is that, revenues are outpacing expenses. And, Hadley has changed. So, it's a small community, but a large daytime population. So I think some of it is, well, what do you want Hadley to be like in 20 years? And so there may be some immediate changes that need to happen and things long-term, but really, again, guiding documents and policies and, formulating what's the best approach for the town of Hadley. And it's not, whether it's my idea or someone else's, it's really what is the best approach for Hadley long-term? How do you make Hadley sustainable, fiscally, in terms of, character, in terms of schools. And so to me, that would be really important. And so, people may oppose some of the ideas, but if it's leading to, sustainability and growth, that's really important. And I think, we've been in Amherst, I think the planning department, trying to take a more proactive approach to that, right? So, it is important for tax revenue. It is important to have new development. And I think for a long time, we wouldn't say that. And I think, it's a missed opportunity to say that planning is important and it is growth. It is the tax base. It's, trying to help, everything happen and support what resources and services are offered. And so, I think it's just, how you would approach that, how do you interact with people? But I think it's really important to name that. So, you have a senior center, you have an aging population. How do you maintain that and support that? You also the farming community. So how do you support that? You want, good schools and people to keep moving here. So how do you have different housing types to allow that to happen? And so there's a lot of competing interests. And I think, but it's important to vocalize that and be clear on that.
Good. Okay. Two things, and I don't know the right term for this, but do you have procurement credentials?
No, I'm not certified. So, I'm familiar with it. So I had done it for years with, like I said, with the accounting department. So I would, work with departments, write the bid specs, do the postings and everything. And I still do some of that, but we have a procurement officer in town who is certified. So I haven't done those, the 3 trainings to get certified.
Okay. Jennifer, I'm not trying to steal your job. I was just curious. And then if you were to get this position, obviously there's going to be a lot for you to learn. And there's going to be people in town hall who will be helping you, providing you with information. How do you deal with taking that all in? I guess my question is, what's your attitude towards being told that you don't know this and I'm going to show you how to do it kind of thing?
I think that's fine. So, when I first started my job at State Street, I had, notebooks of notes, meeting with people, it's like, stack. And then all of a sudden I realized like 6 months later, I looked over at it. I'm like, I haven't looked at that in months, or maybe it was a year later. And so, I really like learning. So to be honest, right, if you could be a lifelong learner, that I like to do that. Right. So it's like learning new challenges. So coming here, it's like I've read, over a dozen contracts. I've looked at all these neighboring communities. I've read 4 of your plans. And to me, that's really exciting to learn and grow. And so, I've read your budget, your service plan, delivery plan. And so to me, I really enjoy that. And so if someone wants to, impart their knowledge on me, I'll take it in and then, you have to calibrate it and see how it, works with someone else's opinions and ideas. But I would take it all in. I think it's really valuable and important. And so, synthesize it and figure out what are the ways to approach it. So again, what are the policies of the select board? What are the priorities of the town? And so, but I like absorbing that information and having it. And so, I've been in Amherst for a long time. And so a lot of people come to me now. So someone, just the finance director called and said, "Oh, I had a question about something we used to do years ago. I think you used to be involved in this, right? Can you tell me, do we still do this? And what happened?" And, and so I think what we do as public service, employees is public, right? So I'm really willing to share my knowledge and I'm hoping people will share with me. And so it's not proprietary, right? So I feel like it's really valuable to share that information and learn.
Thank you. I'm almost set.
So in hearing you talk, I hear this almost idealistic world of a town administrator who has time to look at all of these marvelous potentials.
Sure.
What I see from my involvement in the town for the last number of years is somebody who is constantly answering the phone and putting out a fire. And how do you see them blending?
Sure. I mean, I think a lot of that thinking would happen, after hours, right? So, oftentimes it's like if I'm sitting home at night, even now, it's like I'll go through my email on my phone, or I'll look at my list of things to do. And then it's like, that's my time, right? So the work never really ends. To me, it's like part of who I am. And so, if there's a project happening in town, I'm like, I'll just drive by and just think about it. And so I think that's how I'd approach this, right? I get it. You're going to be busy day to day, maybe hour to hour, but I think it's really important to have time to reflect and think about things. And so I would, and I would do that, on my own time. And so, and that's what I'd like to do. So, looking at a budget and then thinking about it, in the evening is something that I would do. That's how I would, think about it. It's, you might not be able to do it in the moment, right? So, at 1 o'clock on today, I look at the budget and I might not have great ideas, but I will be thinking about it at 11 o'clock at night, or driving in the morning and then have some new ideas. And so, it's just trying to find that balance.
Thank you.
That's how us salary folk operate.
Hmm?
I said that's how us salary folk operate. I don't have no further questions.
David?
Thank you.
Come back. Go ahead.
Molly?
Maybe more of a comment than a question. I think what's most appealing to me is the planning mindset, if I can put it that way. One of the reasons that we're in the situation we're in now, I think, has been, and not to disparage, our leadership or anything else. I mean, we've certainly had some things that have, come out of the proverbial woodwork that have put us here. But I think there has been so much focus on the day to day because we run so lean in this town that the give up has been that thoughtful long range planning. So, that's something that, if we do wind up moving forward, in my mind, that outweighs. I know that there's some sentiment that, well, if we're in a jam, don't we want, the pro from Dover who's already done it before, who's got, and I think I'm kind of leaning into what Amy said previously, that, having a fresh perspective and recognizing that the most important thing you'll be able to deliver to Hadley is the longer range vision. So I'm just saying that that's something that's, I think is critically important and we don't talk about enough. That wasn't a question.
Okay.
All right, everybody, Brandy.
Go ahead, David.
Okay. So I'm gonna ask this a blunt question and then I'll kind of follow up with it. So are you here to turn us into Amherst?
No.
Okay.
I wasn't sure. I thought there was a follow-up.
Okay. And the reason I ask that is because, like we talked about, change is, people don't like change. Right. And I don't want to be Amherst. And a lot of people don't want to be Amherst. We're Hadley. We're different. And so what I just want to make sure to get out there is that you're coming here with an open mind. You're going to do what's best for the town of Hadley, that there's no agenda. There's just, you're here to be the town administrator of Hadley, just because I've heard so many comments from the last time we interviewed you that, oh, he's going to bring Amherst over to here, over to Hadley. And so I think it's just important that people can understand that you're looking at this with a fresh viewpoint, and, change is going to be part of moving forward, but that it's not to look like our neighbors.
Sure. Thanks for that. No, I agree. So I'd want to get to know Hadley more, right? So although I've worked adjacent to Hadley for a number of years, I feel like I still don't know Hadley, and so I'd want to get to know Hadley more, whether that's through meeting with people and plans. But, I will say, I think there's a lot happening in this area, right? Whether it's South Hadley, Amherst, Greenfield, East Hampton, Northampton. So I think there's a lot to learn from our neighbors, lessons to be learned. That's not saying that I want Hadley to become Amherst or Northampton, right? But I think there's lessons to be learned. And so, what's worked and what hasn't worked in some of these communities can then, we could adapt and apply to Hadley. That's not saying I'd want Hadley to become Amherst. And so, I know just looking at, say geographically looking at Hadley, there's a lot of open space. I think that's great to be preserved. And so it's like, okay, well, how do you make that work and also be, economically viable and feasible? And how do you have pedestrian and vehicular connections? How do you have new residential growth and not have suburbia? How do you encourage development along Route 9 to look something different than maybe people don't want it to look like? And so to me, that's really important. So I'm not, if I take lessons from Amherst, I wouldn't apply them directly to Hadley. It's, how do you nuance that and change it to fit this community? And so, like I said, I think it's lessons learned. It's not trying to make Hadley, Amherst.
Thank you.
So I agree with what Molly said about your planning background. How do you envision shutting it off per se while you're learning to be the town administrator? I agree with Molly that we need planning for our future, but I'm sure there's a lot of stuff. I have no idea what the town administrator does on a day-to-day basis. So there's going to be a lot of learning there. So I guess my question is, can you shut off the planner in you and turn on the TA until you know the TA role well enough, and then you can throw the planner back into the mix?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So, a lot of what I've done too is, product management, grant management. So, sometimes it's not, doing the long range planning. It's, just managing a consultant on a project, writing, working on specifications, having job meetings. And so, I think it's, again, a balance in how you approach it. To me, planning is, I think, so if I'm looking at a budget, it's also planning, right? Like how are you looking long-term at it? So, there's the physical, kind of on the ground planning, and then there's the other planning, right? So to me, it's like my mindset is, how do you look at things and look at it in the future? So how do you take a budget and move it along and move it forward? How does it work for the fiscal year? And so I think it's, part of who I am, and I like kind of putting those pieces together and thinking about things. But, I think I can easily turn that, that kind of land use planner off and then say, here's the financial planner, here's, say, the human resource planner. And again, I like learning and adapting. And so to me, it's always, part of that planning piece, but it's not doing that land use planning. It's what other roles are necessary.
And some of these grants that you've been acquiring for the town of Amherst over the years, will those be able to shift some of that stuff to Hadley in terms of what the background you've got in the grants? Is that a town by town situation, or is it something that because anybody can apply for it, you can get the money kind of thing?
Yeah, no, the grants are getting more competitive. I'll be honest. And so, I think more communities are realizing that the grants are important. And so, when I first started applying for like land acquisition grants or parkland grants, I'd go out to Worcester or to Springfield to a meeting, and there'd be 5 communities represented. And now there's, 40. And so I think it's something Hadley can apply for. I think what's helpful is having CPA funding. It's always nice to have a local match or have things be pre-planned a little bit. And so it does take a little bit of planning. So often grants will be more competitive with, upfront planning or a local match. So it's, what are you doing the fiscal year prior to the grant application to get yourself ready? And so, Amherst is lucky to have a lot of staff and plans. And so we can weave it together. I think I'm really good at telling a story. So, doing the research, looking at the plans and saying how this project fits into the grant criteria. And I think that's something that can happen in Hadley. So, you have a lot of documents. It's really, how do you make those connections? How does this grant fit into, say, the pedestrian plan, but also the open space and rec plan? And how does it fit in with the goals of the master plan? And I think that's something that, I've been very successful at. And so, I'm not going to say it would be immediate with Hadley, but I think, I'm familiar with the programs. I know the folks at the state and other, organizations. And I think it's something that, I think would be important to keep trying. Right. So, Amherst isn't always successful. Sometimes, it's, you get 3 strikes and you're still going because it's just really competitive. But
Okay. Thank you. Jane's done. Amy, you're done. David,
Done.
Molly,
Done.
we're done.
thanks.
Do you have any questions for us?
Yeah.
Not at this time.
Okay. I see somebody in the audience. No.
wow.
Well, no, I didn't say you weren't allowed. I said I didn't know if the chair was going to allow you. Would you like?
Yes. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to say something regarding this interview? Nancy? You don't need to go yet, Nate. Hang on.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Nancy Bandman from 17 High Meadow Road in Hadley. And I was hoping you might just talk to everyone about a challenging moment when you had those, as David said, competing interests. And if you could tell us about that experience you had in any context and that you're proud of, that you could share with us. Thank you.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, again, just to speak to it, I think, there's been, I guess it's the level of challenge and what's a big moment. I think, one would be, say, Groff Park. We had a recent renovation, not too recent, I guess now. So it took years to apply for funding. And there wasn't really, agreement on, what the design should look like, input from the community. And then when we hired a contractor, there was a lot of issues with the contractor. And so the project took longer than expected. We had to keep delaying the opening of the park and the splash pad. But I think, everyone really worked together. So, as Public Works, as planning, it's inspection services, with vendors, and we really worked hard to make it successful. And so when it opened, we had a ribbon cutting and, families loved it. And so to me, it was a really good project. It took a lot longer than expected. There were delays, there's change orders with the contractor, but in the end, we made it successful. And so, it's something I took my kids to, and I still do, but we went there a lot, after it first opened. So having a splash pad, the first one in town, a rubberized surface, so an accessible playground, the access to the Writers Walk trails along the river. I mean, it was just a really great, thing. So it was both, community driven, the community liked it. Staff was really proud of it, and the town was really proud of it. It wasn't necessarily easy to get there, but when it was finally done, it was all worthwhile to say, look what we have. We have a really nice amenity in South Amherst, and so we keep saying, let's do it again in North Amherst, right? So it's like it was so successful. It's like, how do you make that work? But again, it was 2 or 3 grants that took 3 years to get, and to be able to maintain and then keep applying, and make the budget work. And so it's I think we have, again, something we've learned from, and it was a great experience.
You have a time constraint?
Yeah, I haven't checked the time.
It's 6.
Who has a time constraint?
I have to, so I have to leave pretty shortly. I have a planning board meeting for the town
At 6:30 or?
at 6:30.
The meeting's at 6:30?
Yeah, I can make it on my phone in my car.
No,
So
well, I think we can wrap this up. We all appreciate you coming, and we'll discuss this, and we'll be back in touch.
great.
Okay?
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate your time.
And thanks for the question.
Don't get caught speeding on the way to Amherst.
I can't.
He's giving him an escort? Is that what I think?
Yeah. Not getting a ticket, he said. Okay, let's move on. Item 3.1 consent agenda. On the consent agenda this evening, we have use of the town commons by the First Congregational Church for Easter sunrise service, April 5th, 2026. And open meeting law violation response delegation to town council to respond to open meeting law violation dated not 3/26. I'm assuming that's 2/26.
3/6/26.
Oh, 3/6/26 for solar subcommittee.
Fat fingers on my part. My apologies.
Okay. Right, so-
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda with the administrative correction of the date to March 6th.
Second.
Okay, motion by Molly, second by Amy. All those in favor? Aye. All right, thank you. Item 5.1.
That's going to be tabled this evening.
Okay, we're going to table the solar landfill committee update and recommendation. All right, moving on to new business. Item 6.1. Council on Aging Director. So we will discuss the hiring of Violet Suska as the permanent senior services director. Who's going to speak to this?
I will speak to this.
Well, before you speak to that, Mr. Mason, do you have anything to say?
So Violet has been one of the several people in town playing double duty. She has been covering her old position as well as covering the COA director position. With the budget cuts that the select board has decided on, one of those position cuts was to the COA. And Violet has showed us that not only is she a phenomenal COA director, but she also has some really incredible skills at budget building. And I don't want to steal her thunder because we heard this mini presentation the other day and it was phenomenal. She has figured out a way to kind of combine some staff, save positions, and actually reduce her budget even more. So really impressive. And I'll let her talk about the budget. There is still some work that would need to be done to combine these positions because the position she was in is a union position. So there would have to be some bargaining that is done. I don't see that it is out of the realm of possibility that it could be done.
Mm-hmm.
But I just want everybody to be aware that everything she's about to tell you is slightly contingent upon that issue being resolved. And I think Jennifer and I both support this idea.
Wholeheartedly.
Okay, so
Thank you.
fire away, Violet.
Yes, Violet Suska, the interim director for the Council on Aging. I'm sorry, I think this is my allergy. Last month, when I met with the TA and the financial director, I was given budget with request for additional cuts of half a full-time position. And it was devastating because we have a staff of 1 full-time and 2 part-time positions in our office plus driver. So losing one staff, it seemed just almost like something that we can't afford. So I decided, and I was given also permission to work with what I received, the numbers, the budget, if I can figure out something. So I was given the budget and the time, and I worked really hard to make sure that I come up with the plan that will work for us and for the town. I respect what was done before me, but having a budget that almost 50% was allocated to one oversight position, and the rest of us was the other half. So our resources for the whole department were very, very limited. So I was thinking if we can merge some responsibilities, responsibilities will be absorbed but by all 3 staff that we have right now. So that way we can manage to continue our great work to serve our seniors, our participants, and provide still 5 days a week open center for them. Given the financial situation, I think it is practical. My plan that I want to talk about, you have a copy probably of that. So again, we were thinking about in the financial situation the town is, how to restructure our department. We are decreasing the budget that was given to us. We are below by about $6,000. So from 193 and change, we went down to 187,000 and change, which is 3% reduction. But compared to the level budget that was originally planned for 27, we actually decrease our spending by 17% almost. So that's a saving of 37,000 and change. We will not lose any staff. Like I said, we're gonna absorb the responsibilities. So director will absorb most of the program coordinator responsibilities, but also admin and outreach coordinator will need to absorb some of those. And we have a plan for that. We had a short discussion with the staff yesterday, and I think we have a wonderful, very competent team that knows what this community needs. And I think they all are on board with me that we are able to do that. So my proposition is that we cut from 140 hours that we were originally assigned to 115, which is 25 hours, which is more than half a full time. And like I said, we keep the staff and we reduce the budget by the final budget given by the town administrator by 3%. So we are under what was given to us. I also gave you some scenarios for different options. We were asked to possibly close 1 day a week or change the hours or remain as we are right now, current hours open. And with my plan that I'm presenting to you right now, I think we are able to remain open 5 days a week, the same hours, and we will not reduce any programming services, essential stuff that our community, our older adults depend on.
So the reason that we brought this before you was just to continue to follow the protocol that we've been following, and that COA is one of the departments that is meeting with Finance Committee tomorrow night. We just, because of this change, it is fairly significant. We wanted the select board, just like I said, based upon how we've done everything else so far, select board hear it first. I don't know that you have to vote or anything like that, but any questions you might have, certainly fire away. But we just wanted to make sure you've heard it before she meets tomorrow night with FinCom.
Okay, I would like to make one comment, and that is, Violet, you truly understand what's going on in this town and have proven that by showing us what you did here. You get that we're in a bad place financially, and you've done everything you possibly can to cut costs and keep services up. So I commend you 1,000,000% for what you've done.
That was our goal.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you, because obviously the initial budget with the cuts, it sucks for everybody. That's the reality. But thank you for taking a harder look at it and still making things work. So
Thank you.
Okay,
So are we,
well, I don't know what I mean,
So I would move that we accept this and encourage the town to go on with negotiations with the union.
That's what we need. We need to know if this is something that y'all would like us to move forward with, because we will have to impact bargain this position with the union for us to do that. And the intent is that we would not ask them to get rid of the program or the program coordinator position, but instead leave it vacant and allow the director to do that work. And then one day in the future, when our horizons are greener, we would be able to pull that part of the duties out and bring the program coordinator back. So we're not going to ask them to lose a position from their union just to let it be vacant during this time, with the intent to come back to y'all one day in the future. And so it'd be great to go ahead and sort of have that knowledge that that's how you would like us to move forward, because we're going to have to start having those conversations sooner rather than later.
so do you want us to make
Jane made a motion.
so that to move forward with union negotiations so that Violet can assume the position?
Yes,
Is that the
that is what I would like you to do.
and I believe that's what you did, right?
Did that.
Yeah.
That's what Jane did.
So I'll second Jane's motion.
Sorry, Amy, Molly beat
Oh, I'm
you.
sorry.
But you can still comment.
Yeah, I'll third it. And then do we have to wait for all that to go through before we make an additional motion to?
I think
have
that we
her
need
as
to, and
director?
and technically the position, I guess, would fall into that frozen land. She is doing the work on an interim basis right now. So if you're going to hire her permanently, you're going to want to discuss it with the finance committee. And so I would imagine this would be something y'all could take up with the finance committee on the 24th. Is that right? Is that the next buy board?
That's the next one.
The next buy board on the 24th, y'all can have that conversation. I believe there's another position you're going to need to take up then too. So there'll be a time that you could do that.
So,
Okay.
but from Violet's perspective, sounds like we are 100% behind you.
Oh, 100%.
Yes.
Supportive.
Yes.
Okay, so Jane made the motion, Molly seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you again,
Thank you,
Violet.
Thank you.
You too.
Great work, Violet.
Okay, item 6.2, Capital Planning Committee. We're going to discuss the composition of the Capital Planning Committee. Who's going to speak to this?
I am.
Okay,
So I realized as it became time for capital planning committee to meet that there was Paul McCretsky was your at-large community member appointed by the select board for capital, and Paul Benjamin was your finance committee representative. With Mr. Benjamin's resignation, Paul McCretsky is still technically your capital, but he's also on finance, and you're going to have a finance member step in. So that would be 2 finance committee members on the capital planning committee. So I was wondering if y'all would like to make adjustments or see if Mr. McCretsky would step over and be the finance committee representative and allow y'all to appoint a new community member, because that's what your position is. It's an at-large community member.
I thought that they already put in, or they already suggested that we put in Peter
Cusco, right.
Matusco.
So that gives you 2 finance committee members.
Yeah, I think.
But no, I disagree. Because I think if there's a community member, that he's going to compartmentalize as a community at large.
Who is?
Paul McCretsky.
This is your decision. I was bringing it to your
Yeah.
attention. I just wanted y'all to be aware of it because it was a change and it kind of shifts a little bit. But this is your decision for y'all to make, and they're not going to meet till April 7th. You have plenty of time to think about this. You have another meeting on April 1st. But I just wanted to bring it to your attention.
It's important also to note that Paul, I believe, is one of the, I want to say founding members. That's weird, but he is one of the original members is the word I was looking for. And has always been the community member. And he is the community member at large. I'm not concerned about him being able to do that.
I'm fine with leaving it as it is. It just so he, according to this, his term for capital is up this year in what, June or July?
June 30th.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I mean, I prefer not to have 2 finance committee members on here. But, I don't want to boot Paul off arbitrarily either, but maybe we could have the term finished out. And then, because I thought the idea of having the community member was somebody that's not in the weeds, that perhaps is bringing kind of that, I'm going to call it outside perspective, because they don't know better. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So because they're not hearing it day in and day out, so that they might be asking questions that we're going to hear at town meeting.
Right.
So once you kind of get onto the finance committee, select board and all of that, so at some point I would like to go back to only having one representative from the finance committee, just for that reason.
That's fine. Like I said, just bringing something to your attention, and it only caught my eye as we were starting to work on posting their agenda, and then that's when I sort of realized that it's a different makeup than what the intent was in the beginning.
So then if we're gonna do that, this is only gonna last until June. Has finance actually selected who's gonna represent them? Have selected Peter at this point or? not?
Yeah,
Yes.
they did it at their last
Peter.
meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that was also with the assumption that Paul was staying on, right? So they may
Right.
want, to talk about it again if they know that only one of them could be on.
Right, and since he was, founding member or whatever, to let them fight that out, so.
Right.
Okay. Jane,
Why are there two members whose terms expired last year listed?
Because I just grabbed the list from out of there, moved it on. So I don't actually, not I, a lot of these are appointed by their boards, not by y'all. So I don't want to say that their numbers are coming from them.
okay, so
Unless they inform me that they've changed, I can't change.
can you make sure that they have been reappointed so we don't run into a situation like the finance committee had a while back?
Who appoints them?
So Bill Vanek and Christine.
Well, I think who appoints them? I don't know.
They're appointed by their committee.
By their,
They're nominated.
We do that?
Do we appoint them?
yeah. I thought
Based
so.
on nomination, right?
I believe you appoint the at-large.
Mhm.
Y'all, the committees all give you their members.
Mhm.
And so it all comes from them. And then it is something you vote on, but it all comes from them.
So the
Right.
assessors and the school committee need to say who their 2026 representatives are.
Their nominee.
Yeah.
And then we would appoint them.
So, and if anybody on the select board would like the capital position from the select board, I'm happy to make that change, just because sometimes the meetings are hard to make when they're really scheduled. So,
You already dumped school on me.
just in a giving mood.
Well, David, I'll tell you what. Paul McCrutsky seems to think I'm still on that committee,
Oh,
and I've been getting texts and whatnot. So if you don't mind, I'll take it.
that's fine.
I mean, based on what you're telling me, it's going to be hard for you, probably easier for me. So I'll deal with that. So we can change David Phil to me on that role.
Okay.
Someone make a motion for that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we boot David and replace him with Brandy
Second.
at the request of the chair.
Yeah. Motion by Molly, second by Jane. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, Randy.
You bet. Okay,
Is that how easy that is? Is that what I gotta do?
that one.
Just that one.
Not for
that
town administrator, sorry.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. Item 6.3, early in-person voting. The Board of Registrars recommend having an early in-person voting for May 19th, 2026 annual town election as follows. Monday, May 11th, 2026 through Friday, May 15th, 2026 from 9:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. each day at the town clerk's office.
Okay,
Somebody needs to
So
make a
moved.
motion.
second.
Okay. Motion by Jane, second by Amy. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Easy enough. See, that was easy too, Mike.
I'm just wondering how you get off things like
Oh.
that was like a master class right there.
I see. No.
Well, you try it.
I don't care about it personally.
Okay. Item 7.1, employee resignation. Joanne Putnam is resigning from the benefits manager position effective today, March 18th, 2026. She will assist with training of UKG, which is an outsourcing company, on an as-needed basis. Anybody need to speak to that?
Yeah, so Joanne was the one that was helping us with the benefits for quite a while. We have entered into an agreement with an outsourcing company to handle all benefits for this town of Hadley. We have had her kind of front load before she left, that she has basically a checklist of that, showing this company how to, how the town of Hadley does their things, which is kind of how we assume she would be training them. We do not think it will be necessary to bring her back. If we did, it would probably be phone calls for a few seconds here or there to tell them how to log into a certain account. But this company has worked with town municipalities who have an HR department and who don't have an HR department. So they're well skilled in handling these types of things. So we don't think we're going to need to bring her back for any reason, but I don't know. We've never worked with this company before, so we just wanted to make sure that if we did have to have her help out with a few things here or there, that the ability was there.
What do we have to do with the committee for the insurance? Is that still, we gotta
That's that lady.
cancel that? Do we gotta change it?
How about we deal with this first? This resignation, is that part of the resignation?
No.
All right, so let's deal with that first.
To accept the resignation of Joe Putnam from the benefits manager position.
Second.
A motion by Molly, second by Amy. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, now,
Perhaps as part of flashback to David Nixon, I'm sorry. Part of Mike Mason's town administrator report. I don't know. As his administrator report, I could give y'all an update in the IAC thing really quickly. They presented their proposal that they would like the towns to accept. They're doing question and answer sessions right now for 3 weeks. So they're doing presentations and walking people through because this is quite a bit. I scheduled an IAC meeting for next Monday morning at 11. You should have gotten the email. And excuse me, I'm going to talk to everybody, explain what's going on up to the point where the proposal, I can't do the proposal yet, but I'm going to tell them what it is, explain that we need to form the PEC, which is the Public Employee Committee, and then work on scheduling impact bargaining. I was planning on bringing it to the select board at your April 1st meeting to go over it with you because there will be impact bargaining with the unions. So that is what under the town administrator update report, that is what's happening with the IAC and the insurance.
Thank you. Yep.
good, thank you. I need to go backwards. I forgot public comment. Is there anybody here for public comment? Okay, that was easy. All right, town administrators report.
Not a lot. All the positions are the same. The only change for levy rehabilitation is that we are restarting working with the Silver Jackets program, which is kind of an admin program to help us, push forward the DLTA grant. Jennifer and Kayla will be working on that. It's just another angle that we're pursuing to try to find money. And the other thing was just what's listed under miscellaneous. And I believe, Randy, you were going to do that under announcements, the last day to obtain nomination papers.
Yeah, I have that.
All right, that's it.
Okay, good. Anybody have a liaison report? Anybody have an announcement? I do. Last day to obtain nomination papers is 5 p.m. Friday, March 27th at the town clerk's office. So everybody rush to the town clerk's and get your papers.
Our office is open till 5.
Well, it
Just to
says,
make special arrangements several times a year to meet these requirements.
right? Not everybody is as timely as Mr. Costick when it comes to taking their papers out.
But we learned how the town operates. So that's right.
Yes, okay, so we're done with that. Next thing is executive session.
I'll make a
Amy,
motion.
you will?
Yeah, sure. I'll make a motion for us. I'm going to make a motion that we enter into executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 38, 30A, Section 21A7, to review for approval and or release the following executive session minutes in accordance. Let me go to that one. That would be for 9/3/2025, 10/1/2025, 11/5/2025, and 11/25/2025. And then also moving into executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, and Chapter 30A, subsection 22F and G, to conduct a strategy session in preparation for potential negotiations with non-union personnel. In this case, it's the fire chief. If an open meeting law may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the town, and if the chair so declares, and we will not be reconvening an open session today.
Second.
As Chair of the Hadley Select Board, I state that the board has moved and seconded to enter into executive session, and that I state that discussing the matter in open session will have a detrimental impact on the bargaining position of the town of Hadley. Roll call vote, please, Jennifer.
Roll call vote, Phil,
Yes.
Keegan,
Yes.
Isaac,
Yes,
Nevin Smith,
Yes.
and Parsons.
Yes.
Thank you.
thank you all. Good night, everybody.